The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you. All right, I'll call the North Carolina Capital Facilities Finance Agency meeting of March 4th, 2025 to order. Would everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the North Carolina flag to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the old North State love, loyalty, and faith.
Thank you, everybody. Let's call the roll.
This is Cindy Aiken speaking. We'll start with Auditor Bolick.
Present.
Present in the room. Thank you. Is Ms. Wilson Arnold with us on the line? We'll come back. And what about Mr. Beam? No. Okay. And Mr. Bowen?
Here.
See him? He's participating virtually. Mr. Bowers? There he is.
Yes.
Test your mic for us, Mr. Bowers. Make sure we can hear you. We see. He's here virtually.
He's unmuted.
My mic says it's
There, there you go. We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. McLaughlin is here. Let's hear Mr. McLaughlin. If you can test your mic also, please. Make sure.
It's on.
Good. I think you're still. Okay, we see his lips moving, and Treasurer Briner is here in the room. While we're working on these technical issues, just very quickly, members, hate to say mute yourself if you're not speaking. Probably don't need to in this meeting. If you'll please identify yourself when you're speaking, and motions and seconds will be taken as affirmative yes votes during the roll call vote, which all votes will be taken by roll call. Hopefully we don't have any technical issues, but this meeting is being recorded according to the department's. Okay, thank you. Ms. Wilson Arnold, I think we've got a message that you have joined us.
I am here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Okay. All right, we're having some feedback issues, but at this point, we do have a quorum, just Mr. Beam absent unless he joins us. Back to our housekeeping. We're recording the meeting in accordance with the department's recording of public meetings policy. This will be posted on our website. The agenda is very brief today, also posted on our website. Do we have, are we real good behind me, the AV? Exactly. Okay. Also, staff is present. Debbie Tomasco, who's Deputy Treasurer, Carolyn Hedden, Interim Secretary Treasurer for the agency. Okay. Moving on. Okay. All right. So if we can't hear you, members, we will probably put you on camera and just wave or put your thumbs up when you're voting. We'll see how this goes.
So we'll begin with some administrative matters. Conflict of interest statement. Please take a moment to review the agenda. Agency members are reminded of your duty to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any member have an actual or potential conflict of interest with respect to any matter on the agenda? Hearing none, let's move on to minutes. You'll see in your packet the minutes from the November 12th, 2024 meeting. I'll look for a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Auditor Bolick, do I have a second?
All right. Mr. McLaughlin, if you just try one more time to unmute yourself. We saw your lips moving. So what? Okay. So that's a second.
All right.
There we go. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up works.
Thank you.
Second for Mr. McLaughlin.
All right.
So please call the roll.
All right. So see, Ms. Wilson Arnold.
Present.
No. Is that a yes on the minutes?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're skipping Mr. Bean, Mr. Bowen,
Yes.
and Mr. Bowers. Okay, thank you very much.
I think
And
Bowen and
Treasurer-
Bowers getting confused, but yeah,
Treasurer
a
Ryan.
yes for me.
I should have used my thumbs.
Motion carries, minutes are approved. So now on to the main event. Maybe let me give a slight editorializing in advance of that. As I inventoried the various boards that I'm assigned to, this one caught my attention for not meeting very often. And I asked the question, why is that? I think that this agency was active issuing debt some years ago for a number of the institutions it oversees in this state, and essentially that stopped in 2023. And the reason that we have garnered is amortization schedules. It is not the only reason, but that's what we're here to talk about today. Whether we can revert back to statute rather than policy on allowing the issuers who come through the CFFA a longer amortization period. Those issuers continue to issue debt. They just don't do it through this agency. And the reason they go to Wisconsin and others, at least they tell us, is amortization period. The other thing that goes on in Wisconsin is a much more expedited, to use the nice word for it, review of their financial status. I think it is a good thing for the state of North Carolina and this particular agency to oversee issuers within our borders in a much more detailed way than we can if they issue outside of our borders. And so we've elevated this proposal as a partial solution to that challenge. We will see if it represents a material change to the number of issuers that come through this commission. But that's the backdrop of why we're here today. And I'll turn it over to Carolyn for
Thank you, Treasurer. Afternoon, members. So what staff is requesting members to do is to rescind a 2012 resolution, which limited the maturity structure to 20 or 25 years, depending on the financial position of the applicant. The new guidance allows staff to review applications and to reflect the economic life of the finance asset, and that's up to 40 years according per statute. So in addition to the maturity period, we will still follow statute parameters, meaning we will review for feasibility, that the asset provides a public benefit and that public facilities will be made available.
So with that, let's open the floor to any board member who has questions, concerns, or musings.
In reviewing the material, I did have an initial question,
Sure.
which has been addressed by staff, saying that the other criteria, as far as feasibility, public benefit, public services being available, will continue to be addressed. That this just deals final maturity and basically staff recommendations to maturity structure.
Yes, Mr. Bowers, what this really does is, as Carolyn said, rescind that earlier resolution, which spoke solely to the final maturities and restricted it by policy to mostly 20 years. This just, again, opens it back up to essentially the maximum allowed under statute, which is 40 years, but allows staff to assess each applicant and to evaluate the appropriate maturity and recommend a maturity for that applicant within the confines of statute of that 40 years.
Yep.
Nothing else is being proposed to be changed or modified.
I appreciate that clarification.
Important. Thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
Thank you. I have a question. Is there a reason why the resolution is being rescinded instead of modified or amended?
From a legal perspective, not necessarily. I think staff just felt it was cleaner to rescind because there were so many components to it and essentially more wholly address the changes being made. there were a number of provisions to that resolution that were no longer applicable under the new policy we wanted to establish. So we just felt it was somewhat cleaner. No real, honestly, no real reason other than that we just felt it was cleaner to essentially start afresh, essentially rescinding in whole the previous resolution and starting with a new basis for the policy.
So thank you so much. I'm sorry, I can't see who was actually speaking.
This is Debbie
there.
Tomasco.
Thank you. Thank you. When looking at the specific provisions that are aligned here, are there any changes in terms of how the staff recommendations are weighed now in terms of the decisions versus today versus what has been in the past with the previous resolution? Because it seems like the total discretion is to the staff's, total decision is to the staff's discretion. Now, has that changed at all in terms of the resolution?
That actually did carry forward from the prior resolution that those maturities are being established with the recommendation of staff.
Is there any need for concern in terms of safeguarding against unintended consequences? Because I think we're now opening it up to not just higher institutions, but other organizations as well. The policy is being set for all applicants coming before the agency. The prior resolution specifically addressed only institutions of higher education. Again, under statute, institutions of higher education, other qualified applicants can seek issuance through the agency. I'm honestly not sure why the 2012 resolution spoke only to the maturities for the institutes of higher education, but this policy is intended to apply to all applicants coming through the agency. Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I did see that difference and I thought this meant we were opening it up to others who weren't qualified before. But what you're saying is all institutions were qualified before, but the resolution just specifically outline institutions of higher learning.
Exactly. And the applicants that may seek conduit issuance through the agency are defined in statute. So again, it's not wide open who can come before the agency. Those qualified applicants are defined in statute.
The agency actually started out as the North Carolina Educational Facilities Finance Agency and started out just doing higher education and then expanded to trying to benefit a larger group of entities.
Thank you for clarifying. So we're not expanding scope in any way in doing this. As I was reading this, a couple things dropped out was just the subjectivity. No, with all due respect to staff, but the subjectivity in terms of the decision making, but that's not changing, then that should not be a problem going forward. And then I thought about, in terms of expanding scope, if we were doing that, would there be unintended consequences to smaller, underfunded institutions? Because there is some language around not financially responsible, but there isn't language here that helps us determine what does financially responsible mean. So the subjectivity of that just piqued my interest a little bit in terms of making sure that, again, we remove all instances of subjectivity in the process.
I understood completely. That terminology, though, does come directly from statute. It's not being introduced through the policy, so that is essentially wording and definitions that we're sort of left to implement,
Okay.
Because it's statutory language. So that's not policy language. That's statutory language.
And just from my own understanding, so thank you for clarifying there. Is financially responsible, is that just defined in the statutes at all, or is it still subjective there, you think?
I don't believe in the definitions section of that article that it's defined. We can check on that, but essentially it really comes down to the next part of what that's describing. It's and capable of. I think that being taken with the next part of that, which that it's financially responsible and capable of fulfilling its obligations. Clearly, I think that's the key factor that staff would be assessing and determining whether an entity were quote financially responsible. It's really that ability to repay that we'd be assessing.
Okay.
Yeah, just, you get back to the point that I had some concern about, and that was that the other criteria, the 4 criteria spelled out in 159D are met. And the first 2 really center on responsibility. And in the annual report of the agency, there have been no defaults to date from the agency, and I just wanted to make sure that we were going to be looking at that. Usually there's some documentation as to how the staff determined that they weren't overburdened and could handle the obligation. I was just looking for comfort, to begin with.
Ms. Aiken, did you have a point?
To address somebody's previous question, this is Cindy Aiken, Assistant General Counsel. I was going to point out what's the same in this resolution compared to the old one and what's added. Debbie said some of that, but when you look at the bottom of page 1 to the top of page 2, where we're reciting the statute, that was not included in the previous resolution, and this is very clearly shows the statutory criteria that this agency is supposed to use when deciding on the funding approvals. And then when you look at our now therefores, the numbered items at the bottom of page 2, number 1 is different, as Carolyn explained. Numbers 2, 4, and 5 were in the old resolution, so those are carried forward. And then paragraph number 3 is additional statutory language that just gives additional guidance to the staff, plus 3B just refers to the fact that there are guidelines for local government commission approved bonds, which is not this body, but just additional guidance.
And those were included more as a matter of reference that staff could use in assessing and determining maturity. Again, we're not bound by that because that's for local governments, but we thought it was a good framework for staff to use in assessing maturities.
Yeah. So again, what this resolution says, number 1 is the main difference about the maturity period. Excuse me. And then numbers 2, 4, and 5 are carry forwards from the old resolution, and 3 is just more specific. Just more factors that staff may consider. And again, staff's merely making recommendations. This body will actually vote, obviously. So, okay, that's all I wanted to point out. Thank you.
No, thank you. That was helpful clarification.
I can't help but the old resolution built some confidence in obtaining ratings from the rating agencies for Social Security. It's very difficult for a small organization to obtain a bond rating. That is really a high standard. And when you expand the hope to benefit to nonprofits, possibly smaller entities, there are going to be those that are quite capable of obtaining and paying for any obligation. And there are going to be some others that you have to think about. But to require everybody almost to get a bond rating would minimize people that could handle obligations that should be serviced, perhaps. It puts a lot of effort on the part of the staff to do their job. Their job becomes a little bit harder I think, under the new resolution, but also I think it's probably gives better asset liability matching, as to what you're trying to accomplish. But it is going to put some pressure on the staff to review the applicant. I think.
No, you're right, of course. We would expect more issuance through this agency as a result of this, and so we will need incremental staff to review that prospective issuance. To me, it comes back to, is it better for this body to oversee issuing entities in the state of North Carolina or Wisconsin's entity? And if we can pull those issuers back to our oversight, I think we're all better for that. Because this issuance is going to happen one way or the other. Please.
Just, so this is Dave Bolick asking a question for those of you online. Just if you've looked at the economic impact for the state one way or the other on this, have you looked at it, and if so, what is the anticipated value other than convenience, which is not understated. I wouldn't understate convenience as a viable reason, but what economic impact to the state, if any, or if you don't know,
It's hard to precisely answer that question. My supposition is that there will not be materially incremental issuance by these entities. The location of that issuance will change. The impact for the issuer, we see between 0.25% and 0.5% lower interest rate issuing through North Carolina as opposed to Wisconsin. So there is an economic impact there where issuing entities in this state will keep more of their money for use rather than paying the bond market. So that is small but important. The bigger one is we continue the tradition of the state being clear watchdogs financially over all of our entities. The LGC has a very proud tradition of that. This agency is newer and smaller, but I think it is right in line with that proud tradition. And so I think that's important for every issuer in the state in every way. What we have here, more that's true, but that is undefined. Any other questions, comments, concerns from folks? Okay.
I have a concern, and I don't know that I have the most informed way of communicating, so I'm gonna ask your patience with it. Understanding that you certainly, I don't live in bond territory every day. Okay, so thank you for your patience. I agree with the recommendation in terms of oversight. I agree with the recommendation in terms of the broader amortization schedule. I am looking for comfort, though. I'll begin with the end in mind. We have a lot of high-performing institutions in the state of North Carolina who are doing great work to prepare our students, our children, our citizens for life, for success, et cetera. I do want some assurances that there is some consideration in terms of the smaller institutions who are not as well funded as private institutions who are as well funded. And so this is probably not a new need. And so my question is, does that make the risk even greater in terms of financial stability for the smaller firms, broadening the net? Or not that we're necessarily broadening the net, but if we're now saying that we're going to be bringing some more of this into the state of North Carolina, does that make the awareness greater and therefore the recommendations greater? Is there a risk to smaller, less funded institutions there? And is this something that you've actually seen in the past?
I think
or have had to consider in the past?
To address the risk perspective, I would say that obviously staff's assessment of any applicant is going to be based on the same set of criteria, just again, to ensure that they're financially sound and to ensure repayment. So whether that be a larger or smaller institution or better or well-funded, that doesn't play into our assessment other than to ensure that we've reviewed the statutory requirements for those entities coming before us and that we can, again, provide that assurance to the agency that we believe that that debt can be repaid. So again, with it being a fairly limited scope of applicants, just as defined under statute, that we're already limited there. But then once those applicants come before the staff and then the recommendations we make to the agency will be solely driven by the criteria set out in statute and the expectations of statute, again, keeping, as Treasurer Briner said, that there's great expectation in the state of North Carolina for the oversight that's provided, and it's come, that results in a benefit to all of these entities and our local government. So I don't believe that Treasurer Briner is looking to obviously pull back on any of that oversight and continue and looks to continue that tradition of strong oversight and the confidence that entities have in our state and in our state credits. So really what we're being driven by here is statute more than anything and those criteria that have to be met.
Thank you.
This is Cindy Aiken. I don't want to speak out of turn because they don't let me touch the, I don't get into the weeds on the financial side, but if I'm not mistaken, and somebody correct me, when they're coming to us for the conduit issuance, the institution pretty much has a financial institution that has already agreed to fund this. So I think that's pretty much how it works. So I think there's another level there. There's another layer there of checks on your concern. If that makes sense.
Thank you for clarifying. It does. Thank you.
That would be true if they're doing a direct placement, which I've done many for the nonprofit type organization. If they're doing a public offering, then there will be some other form of work as far as their ability to repay. But even if they're going to a bank or some kind of funding, the bank is going to ask for some type of documentation, which I'm sure is shared.
Okay. Unless there are further comments, I would ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
I'd make the motion to approve the resolution.
Mr. Bowers. Second, Mr. McLaughlin. Call the roll, please.
All right, so for this resolution, we have Bowers, McLaughlin for the motion and second. Auditor Bullock.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Bowen?
Aye.
Thank you. And Treasurer Briner?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That motion carries.
All right, motion carries. Last item on our agenda is the SEI evaluations.
Yes.
You want to present those?
Yes, just very briefly, for those of you who've been with us for a while, this periodically we get the letters of or statement of economic interest evaluation letters from the State Ethics Commission for all of our board members and designees. And so this round, we just had a few. Just to point out for Treasurer Briner and Mr. Nesbitt, his designee, they found no actual or potential conflicts of interest. And for Auditor Bullock and his designee, Mr. Woodcox, no actual but potential. Potential for conflict in the future. And basically, every time these come up, we just review these and remind all members to just be continually reviewing your own personal, professional, financial associations and watch out for any conflicts of interest. And to conform with the State Ethics Act, we just incorporate these letters into our minutes, and you have hereby been notified. So that's that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aiken. If there is no other business, I'll call your attention to a time change for our next meeting, which is May 6th, now at 12:30. Hopefully we'll be as efficient with your time at that meeting as we have been this time. Is there any other business before the group? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, please. Okay.
Nobody wants to get Mr.
So
Bo,
moved.
Thank you.
I see Bowen and McLaughlin.
All right, Bowen and McLaughlin, thank you. We'll call the roll.
Otter Bowley.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson.
Ms. Arnold.
Ms. Wilson.
Ms. Arnold.
That's an aye.
Mrs. Arnold was fine. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Bowers.
Yes.
And we said and treasurer, of course.
Aye.
Yes, okay.
All right, thank you, everybody, for your time. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all. Have